All right. We will call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. tonight. We're starting with our organizational meeting. Forgive me, trying to get my iPad to work. Starting with our organizational meeting tonight, just a quick reminder before we get started, we'll do the pledge at the beginning of the regular meeting. And we are virtual tonight due to state orders and our students still being in distance learning. All votes tonight will be roll call votes. During the organizational meeting, the votes that are uncontested elections will be approved through acclamation tonight. And don't forget to use your last name if you would during motions so we can get everything recorded. All right. I do not know of any changes to the organizational meeting agenda. Does anybody have any changes? All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda for the organizational meeting as presented?
So moved by Strobel.
Motion by Strobel, second by Easter. All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Oh, excuse me, I already forgot myself. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Bowe?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Ms. Forsberg?
Yes.
Mr. Krohn?
Yes.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Mr. Easter?
Yes.
Ms. Hennon?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, first I'm going to open with nominations for the position of chairperson. Are there any nominations for chairperson?
I'll nominate Amy Hennon.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for chairperson? Are there any other nominations? Okay, I'm going to close the nominations for chairperson. And Amy Hennon is elected chairperson by acclamation tonight. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're going to move on to election of vice chairperson. Are there any nominations for vice chairperson?
Nominate Tony Easter.
Thank you, Tony Easter. All right, are there any other nominations for vice chairperson? Any other nominations? Okay, I'm going to close the nominations for vice chairperson, and Tony Easter is elected vice chairperson by acclamation tonight. Congratulations, Tony.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to opening the nominations for the position of clerk. Are there any nominations for clerk?
I nominate Mrs. Wheaton Forsberg.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other nominations for clerk? Any other nominations? Okay, I'm going to close the nominations for clerk, and Amy Wheaton is elected clerk by acclamation tonight. Congratulations. Finally, we are going to move on to opening the nominations for treasurer. Are there any nominations for treasurer?
I'll nominate Sarah Bowe.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for treasurer? Any other nominations? Okay, I'm going to close the nominations for treasurer, and Sarah Bowe is elected treasurer by acclamation tonight. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, and we are moving on to board parliamentarian. This is a motion and second vote each year. So is there a motion? Let's see, how should we do this? Does anyone want to nominate someone for parliamentarian?
I move that Marilyn be parliamentarian.
All right, thank you. Motion by Strobel for Marilyn Forsberg to be our parliamentarian. Is there a second?
Second, Wheaton.
Second by Wheaton. Is there any discussion? Marilyn, you're okay with that? Excellent. Good. All right, clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Ms. Bowe?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Ms. Forsberg?
Yes.
Mr. Krohn?
Yes.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Mr. Easter?
Yes.
Ms. Hennon?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the part of our organizational meeting, but for the regular meeting, anybody else have anything else in the organizational meeting? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn the regular organizational meeting?
So moved, Easter.
Motion by Easter.
Second, Bo.
Second by Bo. All right, to adjourn the meeting, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Bo.
Yes.
Mr. Strobel.
Yes.
Ms. Forsberg.
Yes.
Mr. Kroon.
Yes.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Mr. Easter.
Yes.
Ms. Hennon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. So our organizational meeting is adjourned at 7:05 p.m. And I'm going to call to order our regular meeting at 7:05 p.m. All right, and we will start this one with the Pledge of Allegiance, our super exciting, somewhat painful virtual experience. All right, are we ready, everybody? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which
it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and
justice for all.
Excellent, we did it. Thanks, everybody. All right, moving on to agenda approval. I know of one change to the agenda. We're going to remove the closed session tonight. Does anybody have any other changes to the agenda? All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda with that change of removing the closed session?
So moved by Strobel.
Motion by Strobel. I see you, Tony.
Second by Forsberg.
Second by Forsberg.
Sorry, technical.
That's
difficulties
no
there.
problem. I appreciate you guys helping out. All right, is there any discussion? All right, clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bo. Mr. Strobel.
Yes.
Ms. Forsberg.
Yes.
Mr. Kroon.
Yes.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Mr. Easter.
Yes.
Ms. Hennon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to some future events. Please check the district calendar and resource guide or the district website for a complete list of monthly events. Monday, January 18th, no school for students or staff and buildings, childcare, and district services center is closed. Friday, January 22nd is our school board retreat at 11:30 a.m. Tuesday, January 26th, school board work session at 6 p.m. And Tuesday, February 9th, school board regular meeting at 7 p.m. with communication to the board and administration at 6:45. Moving on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
So moved, Wheaton.
Motion by Whitney.
Second by Forsberg.
Second by Forsberg. Thank you. To approve the following items: minutes of the December 4th, 2020 school board work session and December 15th, 2020 school board regular meeting minutes. Bills paid for November 2020 in amounts totaling $5,242,829 and personnel items circulated previously. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bo.
Yes.
Mr. Strobel.
Yes.
Ms. Forsberg.
Yes.
Mr. Kroon.
Yes.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Mr. Easter.
Yes.
Ms. Hennon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to discussion reports and information items. Number 1, district operational plan update, strategic imperative, ensure learning through a pandemic. Dr. Ronneberg and Dr. Ron.
All right, as we started the year and kicked it off, I think, by the way, Erica's going to be pulling up the, yep, there we go, the presentation for you to follow along. As we started the year, we kicked it off, and the primary project within our district operational plan was this one, ensuring learning through the pandemic. It's a year like none other, and at the start of the year, we said that really had to be our priority about how are we going to manage multiple learning platforms, be able to successfully transition through those and just make sure that it's as successful a year as possible. And so we kind of wanted to provide an update right now on how things have been going, as well as we're excited of the transition that we have beginning next Thursday with being able to bring our K-6 students back to school full time. So we're going to walk through all of that. First off, we started an overview of our learning models or platforms for this school year. We started working on this last spring, and then when the state came out with their safe learning plan, they really required us to flex between 3 models, and they were pretty much the same 3 models that we'd already identified that we needed to move with, and they'd said in-person, hybrid, and distance learning. We'd already named them open campus, modified campus schedule, and extended flexible learning. And as you may remember, we began the year with that modified campus schedule, K-12, and then also we had the opportunity for all families to select extended flexible learning. If we go to the next slide, you can see we started the year with 66% of our students in what we called the responsive learning model at the start of the year, because we knew we would likely have to flex between, for people that signed up for the start of the year in modified campus, we knew we may have to flex to our distance learning model, or what we call extended flexible learning at some point during the year. And hopefully, we hope to, and now we're going to be able to with elementary, move to a fully in-person model that will start next week. But we started the year with 66% of our students in that responsive learning model, starting the year in modified campus K-12. Where we're at right now is we will be at 69% of our students in that K-12 beginning next Thursday. Of our K-6 students who were enrolled in extended flexible learning this year, we opened up that opportunity for them at the K-6 level to select to come back to school fully in person next week. So since last week when we made that announcement, we allowed families to either choose to come back in person or move back to extended flexible learning, which by the guidelines within the Safe Learning Plan, we have to be able to allow parents to flex to that model at any time. So we had 150 student requests since last Thursday when we made the announcement in K-6. And 150 students requested to move from EFL to in-person. We also had 69 requests to move to EFL from in-person. So that's a net increase of 81 students who will be coming in person. So we'll now be at in K-6 grades, about 30% of our students will be in the EFL learning model or extended flexible learning model, and 70% will be in person. So there were only 219 requests for changes that we had, which is about 6% of our students. So 94% of the families decided to stay with the model that they'd already selected. So that's kind of where we sat. Just kind of looking at this again, the recommendations and guidance back in December, the governor announced those revisions to the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan, and they came out with new guidance that we could reopen schools no earlier than January 18th for pre-K-6 to come back in person. 7 and 12, they reaffirmed that use of county level case data and those threshold numbers with that, still for grades 7-12. On January 6th, we met with our Spring Lake Park Regional Support Team, and that includes representatives from the Department of Education, Department of Health, Anoka County Public Health, and then there's also a number of school district leaders and teacher union representation in that as well. So when we met with them, we talked to them about our plans to transition students back. And since we had not announced that we would be in distance learning past winter break, we'd announced that before the governor's announcement, we'd announced that we would be in distance learning through the end of the calendar year, and that we'd make an announcement prior to break about what we'd be doing in January. So we had just made an announcement that we would come back for 1 week of distance learning and then make an announcement in January. So what our transitions might be at that point. So when the governor came out, that gave us the flexibility to consider bringing all of our students back at once instead of the rolling start. And as we looked at that, that was something we really wanted to be able to do because we felt like we could do it safely and meet all of those mitigation requirements that are part of the Safe Learning Plan. And so as we met with the regional support team, they endorsed that plan. They had confidence in our health and safety plan, and they gave us the okay to bring those students back beginning next Thursday. So we're excited to do that. So all of K-6 families that want to have their kids attending school in person. We'll start doing that 5 days a week on the 21st. 712, we did explore with them and talked with the regional support team about being able to bring back our 712 students in February. We've seen some declines in the county case data. At this point, they said that those guidelines remain in place, and so we scheduled another meeting with them next week to explore when we might be able to get those kids back. We want to do that as early as we can in February. So we move on to that next slide. You can see this is the 14-day case rates over the past few weeks, and you can see from where it was up over 200 for some time, but just in early November when it was right up at 200, it's come down consistently, which is great news. It came under 50 here recently, and we anticipate it to come down again. So we're starting to get closer and closer to 30. So that's why we scheduled that meeting again with the regional support team next week so we can look at options. And as you look at the next slide, you can see that the daily case counts have continued. They've been kind of all over the place, but the good news is they've been much lower than they were in November and early December. So they've come down, and the last few days have been down. So we'll see where that goes, and we'll talk with them next week and explore that possibility about bringing our 712 students back. What we're doing for them right now is we do have some of those kids coming back in person, and I'm going to let Hope talk with you about some of the things that we have in place for those kids.
Yeah, so we are beginning to we have had students back in person for some targeted support, even though as a whole we're in extended flexible learning. Prior to K-6 going to extended flexible learning, we had larger number of students back for that targeted support. We pulled that back a little bit once we went to extended flexible learning as a system, and now we're bringing those students back. So what's happening right now at 712, those 3 categories of learners who we can bring back to school per the Safe Learning Plan. The learners have been identified as needing additional targeted support. Right now we have about 30 students at Westwood and 30 at the high school coming in regularly for targeted support on their A days and B days. And both sites are working to expand the number of students receiving that targeted support to include those students who were initially identified back in October and early November. That second category, learners who need a school setting to have meaningful access to teachers and or mental health services. At Westwood, all students identified for mental health supports are receiving these services either online or are coming into the school explicitly for that service for that period of time. At the high school, most of their students identified for mental health supports are receiving those online. The vast majority of them are getting those online. Additionally, at the high school, any students who are not accessing their courses on a regular basis are coming into school to access their courses as a means to prevent students from entering that 15-day drop status. High school staff have set up multiple points of contact using a variety of methods to get students on site to access their courses. And they have continued, we knew this from earlier in the year, but they have continued to find this to be a huge benefit for the students who are in the situation of having difficulty accessing their courses from home. And then that third category for learning learning experiences that cannot be provided or accessed through a distance learning model. Since we went to extended flexible learning as a system K-12, we haven't done any of that, what we call that on-demand learning. We are now starting to identify the types of learning within courses now that we can bring more students back for this. And one example of that is that our OEC students will start returning for their exams, which of course are the majority of our hands-on and experiential assessments. So we're looking to bring students back in for that type of learning that just can't be replicated in an online environment.
Okay, the other piece that I'm sure you're well aware of just is that we started that athletics and activities kicked up last week on January 4th with practices, and this week, and we'll begin games soon here, and all of our sports are practicing and underway, and kids are excited to be back and having that opportunity, even though it's going to be a shortened season. The coaches' kids are excited to get out there and have that opportunity to at least have a season. Also, we have various clubs. Some of those will be able to start meeting in person soon, but some of those clubs are even meeting in a distance environment that are not underneath the state high school league. So we're excited to get that kicked out again. And then the next piece is just that transition plan. I kind of briefly highlighted it earlier, but one of the things as we were planning this, we started with that assumption that if a family was in modified campus, had selected the responsive learning model and started the year in modified campus, but had moved to distance, that they would stay in that model. If they selected extended flexible learning, that they'd stay in that, and we invited them to submit a change request to us by the end of the day Monday. And I highlighted the number of families. About 6% of the families decided to make that a shift. 94% didn't. So that's what that's really allowed us to do, is we're not having to make significant staffing shifts at all from teachers who are currently teaching extended flexible learning or teachers teaching in person. We're not having to shift that. We're able to maintain that. So that's good news. Part of that transition, next Tuesday and Wednesday, the Safe Learning Plan requires 2 days of transition days for teachers. So that will be those 2 days for teachers to do teacher planning and get ready for the kids, who will start back on the 21st, and school will resume on the 21st. So just as Hope walked you through a little bit what some of the things we're doing for kids in person now, 7-12, she'll walk you through what open campus will look like in the K-6 model.
Thanks, Jeff. So as you can see, as we return, we want to capitalize on the opportunity to bring what we've learned from using our typical in-person to our modified campus to extended flexible learning, bringing back what we've learned into our classrooms as we transition. And each school leadership team has actively sought input and insight from staff as they design that return to open campus learning. We also had the summary from this past spring from our parent stakeholders on pieces that they found to be valuable as they were experiencing shifts to learning as well. So we'll just run through a few of those examples. The themes that we heard as each building shared this past Thursday one is to continue multiple opportunities for small group learning. And if you remember, one of our guidelines for extended flexible learning at the elementary level is to provide reading and math instruction primarily through live small group instruction. And the feedback from our teachers is that they're seeing increased student learning in that format because students are able to put their voice into the discussions around the learning, and teachers have been able to give more individualized specific feedback within that small group setting. So as we return to in-person learning, the opportunities for small group instruction will continue to be emphasized, specifically in the areas of reading and math. Secondly, to continue to capitalize on the use of learning technology to enhance and personalize learning experiences. And this is actually a similar theme we heard from our parent stakeholders back in late April when we asked for their input on their experiences in extended flexible learning. And what we heard from our parent stakeholders is now that our kids, teachers, and parents are utilizing our learning technology better and deeper than what we have in past years, let's not lose what we've gained in this area. So to be clear, this doesn't mean that when we return to in-person, students will be sitting for hours doing asynchronous work in their classroom. But teachers will continue to design purposeful asynchronous and synchronous learning experiences that really allow for personalized lessons and for our students to continue to learn how to be digital citizens and media makers as we continue to prepare them for the future. Third, to continue the ability to flexibly schedule to meet student needs. Again, this insight from our teachers most recently builds on the insight we gained from parents last spring. The ability to flex schedules has really allowed us to focus on learning as a constant rather than time. And since we know that students learn at different paces, it requires a flexible approach to the day to meet the learning needs of each student. So each building, as we heard a little bit about their initial designs, had different hows for how those their flexible approach to scheduling. And then finally, continuing to scale implementation of our new reading resources at K-6, both Wit and Wisdom and Foundations. And as a board, I know you had heard a lengthy presentation about both of these resources a couple of months ago. And just to refresh, teachers are starting Wit and Wisdom at some point during the second trimester. There was no one specific date designated. It was as it was authentic to where they were at in their learning, they were making the transition. And many of our teachers have jumped in. For Foundations, we're giving teachers the options of starting implementation yet this year or waiting until the fall and continue to implement our past phonics approach. And again, we've seen many teachers working toward implementation this year. And Jeff, you can cut me off when I need to cut off, but I did want to share from some teacher voice and some student voice around the early implementation of these resources. And so hearing from a center-based teacher at Westwood at the 5-6 level, a center-based special education teacher, her comments were students with Wit and Wisdom are more willing to share what they are thinking, learning, and wondering than ever before. And this resource allows her to differentiate for the wide variety of needs the students in her program demonstrate, while still providing access to really strong core reading instruction. One of our 5th and 6th grade teachers says, one of the first things I've noticed is the attention students are putting into their writing. They are asking for more time to finish their writing. And she goes on to say the meticulously crafted lessons in the resource provide opportunities for students to refine their craft. First grade team jumped in and added, while reading fiction books, we always end with looking at the author's note. In our first module, the author's notes have been describing how the books are based off of real people and experiences. This provides a real-world connection for students, and when paired with videos, students have been very engaged in learning how different kids live around the world. These have also led to more student inquiries that align with social studies and science. And that first grade team went on to say students are so excited about the big words they're learning and have been using them in different parts of the day. For example, in their reading course, they learned about the word reveal, and later on in math, when they were doing number corner, one student said, hey, it's time to reveal the new calendar marker. That was pretty fun. Around Foundations, we have a first grade teacher who shared Foundations is fun. To have a systematic approach that allows students to learn the letter, keyword, and sounds along with the handwriting of the letter is great, and we cannot wait to keep building these skills. Plus, in first grade, they love Echo the Owl and Baby Echo, which help them learn their phonics skills. All the kids are excited and engaged. And with just a side note from me, with phonics learning, that is a cause for celebration, to see kids excited and engaged about that. Another teacher, I just have a couple more really, another teacher says Wit and Wisdom is rigorous for our students, and it's also elevating our thinking as teachers. Students are excited about Foundations and how they learn phonics, spelling, and handwriting all together all at once, which helps create a foundation for reading. And then lastly, one of our extended flexible learning teachers shared with us these resources are such a gift. It's nice to have something we know that most currently supports the reading research. It's all inclusive, so we do not have to spend time searching for and vetting supplemental materials. We have greater conversations in our professional learning community about the reading research than ever before. She went on to share that she loves how it incorporates art and poetry, and she's seen that this has led to greater engagement during group learning. The kids are thinking more deeply and analytically. And she gave a couple of examples from student voice, and I wanted to share this. One of the questions that she asked was, what do the following words have in common? Window pane, rainstorm, landscape, and outside. And so how the prompt is in the resource itself, it allows for kids to use creativity and analytical thinking. And so the first response the teacher received was, oh, they all deal with things that have to do with the outdoors. The window lets you see into the outside, and the rest happen outside or can be seen outside, okay? And she went on to get multiple ideas for kids thinking both creatively and analytically. with that. Of course, they all also happen to be compound words, right? But it allows the kids to put their thinking and their wondering in place and then learn the explicit skill that they're getting to. And then final example, she asked the students, how does this poem weather help you learn about change? These are second graders. And the teacher thought it might be hard for them to provide evidence when they answered this question. And a student wrote, in the poem Weather, I learned changes can make things and people different or do different things. In the poem, the window was changed by weather when it became dotted by rain, so it was different than normal. The person it was talking about changed too. They changed from being inside looking out to going outside, and their feelings changed. So her final comment, student discussions make it feel like she's sitting in a middle school lit class rather than a second grade classroom. Everyone is able to engage in higher order thinking skills. So I know I spent a little more time on that one, but because you've been so involved in that process, I just wanted to bring you along on the early implementation. So to wrap that up, schools will be finalizing their designs. Tony, Jeff, the rest of Cabinet has been checking in with principals and school leadership teams multiple times a week. They'll finalize those designs this week. We had to wait for those requests to come in and look at the implications of those. And then we'll be ready to go.
All right. So one of the reasons I wanted Hope to kind of take a couple of minutes to highlight that work with Wit and Wisdom, because it's really great news to see what's happening there. This would have really been an easy year to just fall back on the old ways of working and say this isn't a year to make a change and really try to advance the work that we're doing in reading. Yet we knew we needed to upgrade what we were doing there for kids. We had teachers really asking for that. And I think it says a lot about the organization and the teachers within our district that they, despite all the challenges and the many variables that we have with that have been presented this past year, they still wanted to make this shift, and they felt like they could do it well and really advocated for that, and they are. So I commend the work that Hope and her team did and teachers throughout the system, because it's a lot of fun to see in a time that we, it would have been easy not to do this. They really wanted to do this because they felt it was the right thing to do for kids. So thanks to all of them. Next piece is we started the year, and you got to hear probably ad nauseum about health and safety practices beginning back, I don't know if it was July, but for sure in August. And most of those mitigation practices we have, we'll still be keeping in place. I just wanted to highlight a couple shifts with the announcement that the governor made in December that we need to make or are able to make in order to bring students back to school here later this month. So first off, and they're italicized on the slide there. The first one is that we need to supply teachers with face shields and plexiglass. So all teachers will continue to be required to wear masks. We're required to provide for them a face shield as well, and it's encouraged that they wear those, but it will be up to the teachers if they decide to wear the shield with the mask. Initially, they said they had to wear both, but then the Department of Education, Department of Health said we needed to provide that for them, and it would be optional. It would be up to the teacher if they'll wear that. So, but what they're very clear on when we met with the regional support team is that it's highly recommended. So that's what we shared with the teachers. In addition, you can see down there, there's a 3-foot distance for students, but 6 feet between the students and the adults, and 6 feet between adults with one another. So when a teacher is not able to keep that 6-foot distance, we need to have a plexiglass barrier available for them. So we're providing that for each teacher. That, again, that's up to the teacher if they're going to use that, but it's highly encouraged that the teachers maintain that 6-foot distance. That last piece is we need to have on-site COVID-19 testing for staff every other week and have that available. And Tony and Becca have been working with that, and we'll have that in place starting on the 19th. So we'll have that available for teachers. The other thing is the health screening expectations. I'm not going to walk through all of this. You're aware of this, but this continues to be in place for students and staff self-screening before they come to school each day. So we'll continue to encourage that and remind families of that through newsletters and other ways. In addition, then, what we're also keeping in place is before and after school childcare for school-aged children is going to be available. Families can find more information online about that and register, make requests to be involved with that. And I just want to, again, sing the praises of our childcare staff. They've done a tremendous job. They've been on site throughout the school year and doing a great job with the kids. When I've stopped at the school, I can't sing their praises enough. So big thank you to them. Then also meals, we'll be continuing with meals, and you may remember they're free of charge this year for all families, and that funding for schools is provided by USDA and the Summer Food Service Program, and it's just extending throughout the year. Breakfast and lunch continue to be available for children in our community. So while our K-6 students will be back in school full time, we'll continue to provide meals out in the community for those students that are choosing to be in EFL, but also for our 7 to 12 students where that's still the only learning model we have in place for students 7 to 12 is that distance learning model. So we'll still have those meals in place. And then just what to expect going forward. One of the, I have not had a ton of questions with this transition, but one of the questions that I've had a number of times from various parents calling me or emailing has been, what are the chances that elementary will go back to a hybrid or a distance learning model? And what I've shared with them is, and I've had the opportunity to be on another learning model transition task force at the state level. And what they've assured us, the Department of Health, is that they really don't expect any kind of change with pre-K6, that they're no longer using that county level infection data as part of that decision making for children in the elementary grades. That said, you may remember us talking about the scalpel method or scalpel process or method earlier in the year, where you'd look at individual grade levels within a school, classrooms. There still be, depending on that viral activity within a school, a classroom, it may be necessarily to temporarily close or quarantine schools or classrooms, just like we would with the flu. So for example, if 5% or more of the students have those flu-like symptoms, we would maybe have to do that. We didn't have to do that this fall, really, so we'd hope that we won't have to do that this spring. But that health screening and testing will continue to be critical factors with this. And again, for grades 7 and 12, we can expect to, at least for the time being, continue to be held to using that county level infection data. But as I shared earlier, we do have another meeting scheduled with them next week and provide an update to families by the end of next week, by January 22nd, about where we're at, with hope, and hopefully sharing that we'll have a time that we're going to be able to transition here in February. But we'll have more information for them at that point. So with that, are there any questions that you have?
Anybody have questions?
It's just a little trivia question, I think. When we talk about wit and wisdom and talked about that children were learning to write along with learning about the letters, are we teaching cursive or is it all printing?
No, we still teach cursive in grade 3. So that has continued all throughout. So
kind of controversial these days. Seems like some kids can't read cursive because they've not been taught. So happy to hear that. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
I'm sorry. I don't think you're teaching cursive at Woodcrest, are they?
Sorry, you were breaking up a little bit, Michael. I couldn't hear the question.
Just to Marilyn's point, I'm not sure that it's the same at Woodcrest. I'm not sure they are being taught cursive there. Am I right on that?
Each school's provided with resource for grade 3 for the masters, the Black Line Masters for cursive. So. And as we move into foundations, cursive remains as part of the foundations approach as well.
Well, my kids weren't taught cursive, so just throwing that out there.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? Questions?
Just a quick question related to staffing, the staff themselves, and are they excited to come back? Are they, what's the general feeling from staff?
Yeah, I think like anything, there's some people with some apprehension. I think there was also a lot of people that were ready to come back. They're excited to get back with their kids. So, and even with that enthusiasm to come back, there's some apprehension. of course, and I think that's natural. But I think people saw that we had real strong mitigation strategies in place in the fall, that we'll have those in place now. There's, but where the apprehension and concern is from, it's just having, instead of maybe 14 kids in front of them now, it might be 20, 21 kids. And so how's that, it's just going to be different than it's been. But that's why those transition days, I think, are important, to get them together, have them be able to talk through that and work through that. And but overall, I think people just feel good about working with kids, and they did a nice job this fall.
I have a question, Jeff, about buses. So will buses just be running then as normal? Will there be emails going out saying, are you planning on using the buses, or is it just kind of, they're going to assume that they're doing the same pickup they were doing before?
Yeah, I'll maybe let.
Also, do they have the same capacity? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll let Amy kind of speak to some of that. Part of when they made the request, we did ask them to share if they wanted or needed transportation, those kinds of things. So, but the social distancing limits and so on at the elementary grades have been lifted, so we do not have those in place on the buses. But I'll let Amy speak to it a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so as Jeff just mentioned, as far as capacity goes, at the secondary level, they do still need to social distance. At the K-6 level, they do not. So as parents have called in and said they would like to request busing, we have made, the admin assistants do have a list of things to kind of run through with parents, and one of those is to make sure they're aware that there is not a social distance requirement between the students. There is between students and driver. But then from there will be seating assignments, so that if there is any tracing that needs to be done, students will be assigned a seat based on the order in which they get on the bus in the morning. And then we are waiting for those final lists from the buildings to inform the transportation department of who will be riding the bus. So at this point, we are assuming that because we were doing A day, B day, we're not expecting a large number of changes, that the routes will just continue. We're really just adding the students from the 2 days together. But we will be sending out postcards next week with that this week with that information, so that parents have it before next Thursday. And then in addition to that, it will be in parent portal as well. We were a little leery of just saying your times won't change, just in case there were any students who had a time change for maybe a targeted small group that they were coming in for. So the vast majority of our students should be really within a few minutes of where their times before. Did I hit on all your questions?
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Questions?
Yes, one more. Lighthouse. Lighthouse has a mixture of students, grade-wise. Are we following the same guidelines with that students who would normally be K-6 are coming back full-time and not the older students?
Correct. So Lighthouse is with how we report to the state, it's a Lighthouse K-6 school and a Lighthouse 712 school. So the Lighthouse K-6 students have that option to be returning to school at this time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Tony. I'm glad to see that we're still implementing Wit and Wisdom, that we're still moving forward with it, and it seems almost like it's a great distraction from the other things that are going on, that the teachers are kind of gravitating to that, which is great. My question is, and maybe this is more for County Mayor, it's good to see that there were some updates to some of the guidelines for opening up K through 6. My question is around the COVID testing. Is it required for staff to be COVID testing, or is it just required to offer it? And if so, how soon do they get the results?
Yeah, Tony, really good question. So the requirement is for the district to offer it and make it available to any of our staff that are working in an in-person manner with students, so having interaction with them. So we've interpreted that very broadly. So it's going to be available to nutrition services staff, custodians, coaches, and then obviously teachers, clerical, and support staff. But it isn't mandatory for them. They have an option. The scheduling that we've created at each of the sites that are going to be hosting the testing, it's going to be flexible enough for people to be able to get there during their common work times, either before or after. So it's going to be readily accessible to them. We don't get the results. The district doesn't get the results. They're emailed directly to the employee. And then it typically would take a couple of days because we're having to mail the saliva kit into Vault testing for analysis, and then they email the result to the employee a couple of days later.
I will say, I don't know if others have done this, but I've done the Vault testing several times at the Anoka County Armory because Scott's in healthcare and we try and stay on top of it. And I usually get those the next day. If it's the same system, they're really, really responsive. So that's good news.
Yeah, and that's what I was curious of is would they get the results the next day? And I think they're introducing a 30-minute test that I heard. So yeah. I was curious as to which one we would be using. So, thanks, Tony.
Yep, you bet.
Excellent. Anybody else? Okay. Obviously, we can discuss more of this at our retreat as well. Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to effective operations, improve our effective management of human, financial, and physical resources. Monthly financial report for November 2020, Ms. Amy Schultz.
All right, thank you, Erica. So we are doing the monthly report for November this month. And with that, Erica, if you can move forward. On the treasurer's report, again, this is our beginning and ending cash balance, as well as our cash receipts and disbursements for the month of November. On the receipt side, it's actually, November is always one of the slowest months of the year from a state aid standpoint, so it was less than $800,000. About $4.1 million in taxes was received in November. It's one of our larger months for that. Another area within that, though, was we received 1.2 of the $1.7 million of coronavirus relief funds in November. So that's why November is otherwise a little higher than what we would typically see. On the disbursement side, we did have a couple of big disbursements as well, and you'll see those as we move through this on the expense side. So again, we're the food service and community service being negative. Those are those two programs that have been running all year and providing services during the pandemic, such as meals and daycare, where the revenue is not following necessarily the services at this time. So when we knew that, and we are using some of the coronavirus relief funds and other ESS, ER, and federal funds to cover some of those losses. So the statement of revenues, this is our revenues to date for the month, year to date, the budget. And again, this is our original June adopted budget. We will be looking at making budget adjustments at this point, potentially in the month of either February or March. So at that point, you will see some changes to this. Our revenues look right on within the general fund. It's probably a little bit misleading. We're a little bit behind on areas like enrollment, so our state general education, but we are ahead because we had not budgeted yet for the different CARES funding revenue streams. So they're offsetting each other a little bit at this point. And then food service and community service, again, are behind where they would typically be because the revenues under even the summer food program are not as high as they would be under the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. And again, within community ed, not charging for some of those daycare services or being able to offer all of the programming and rental availability that we normally would. So on the expense side, on the next slide, so this one, most things look like they're kind of right in line as far as compensation for purchase services. They're a little bit close to where we would expect them to be. Supplies, capital, and other are areas that we allocate to departments, and they spend in different ways. They do their best to allocate the budget, and we move those around as needed. But this month in November, we had a really large supplies and materials. 1.7 is a much larger number than we would typically see. So within that, though, we wanted to make sure you guys were aware that that's not common. You shouldn't really see that again at this point. But that's why you see 173% compared to 73% last year and 98% the year before. So of that, we just talked about the the foundations and the Wit and Wisdom. November, we made large payments on those. So in November is where the payments went out for much of that program, as well as over $500,000 in student technology devices that were ordered to make sure we were updating all of our devices and students had those in their hands as soon as we could. So those had been ordered a few months beforehand, but did take a while to get here. So in November is when we paid for those. So with that then, that is the monthly report for November, if there are any questions. I probably should say listed those expenses for those large supplies and materials. It's a little bit of a misleading code to say supplies, but that's the coding structure we have to follow. Those are being covered by combinations of CARES funding or the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the operating capital fund balance that we carried over from fiscal 20, knowing we would be having this adoption, as well as current year curriculum funds.
Thank you, Amy. That was informative. Anybody have any questions?
Yes, on food service and providing free food, are we getting any people to request free and reduced lunches, or are we in the same boat as many districts that are not getting those applications in and as a result probably having some impact on compensatory?
Yes, we did see a decrease in our applications for free and reduced lunches, so we are right in line with pretty much every other district that I have heard from when it comes to that. We did make a really big push, and our buildings did a really good job making phone calls when that extension was granted, that last week before Christmas break. And we did pull in, I think it was another 80-some households, so about 150 kids of additional funding. So we still will see a loss in compensatory education, barring any legislative action to hold harmless. We don't know yet if that will happen or not, but we are expecting to see a decrease next year if that does not.
All right, thank you, Amy. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Tony. Quick question. Looking down the road, are we expecting any additional expenses around opening up K-6, such as the COVID testing that we're providing for teachers?
And you know what, we'll have to let Tony and I haven't connected yet, and that's a service that's being provided by the state, and we're just listing a site. We will see some additional expenses. Maybe it was tough to more plan for K-6. If you had asked back in November, would we be bringing them back when? So as we kind of project through the end of the year and hope to have more kids back on site, some of the PPE type expenses, cleaners, masks, and things like that, our expenses will start to increase again for those.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of the testing, all of the test kits and analysis of the saliva, all of that's being funded by the state as long as funds are available. So we don't know exactly how long it's going to continue. In terms of costs that the district may incur related to testing, we are going to be offering some of the sites will be doing their testing slightly outside of a few staff work hours. So there may be some nominal staffing costs associated with it, but it's very minor.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Okay, thanks, Amy. And obviously budget is also something we always discuss at our retreat, so we'll discuss that more. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Ronenberg.
Okay, yeah, just a few things, and one is kind of speaking to that last question. Good news is that, so first off is we're not anticipating, as I kind of mentioned earlier in that last presentation, we're not anticipating needing to add any staff to be able to make this transition back or switches like that. But we did just receive an update late today, and I got an update email that we're going to be receiving additional COVID relief funds. We're going to be reviewing those in the coming days, and we'll update you in the coming weeks about that. But those relief funds will help with, for example, some of the things like needing to purchase plexiglass barriers for teachers to have available, and some of the additional PPE and expenses, things like that. So that's good news, and we'll have to see what the restrictions, timelines, those kinds of things, as you may remember, come with those various grants. But we'll update you on that. But that was good news. We're going to be talking fiscal year 22 budget and beyond in upcoming meetings. As you know, we're in fiscal year 21, and typically we're even farther along with talking fiscal year 22 at this point. But given the year that we're at, and there's a lot of variables, unknowns with the budget as we look to next year, we're going to start talking about that. But as we do that, I just kind of wanted to give you some key dates that influence where we're at. First up is the governor will release his budget proposal on January 26th. So he has to do it by then. For the legislative session, it's going to be interesting to see what that is because he has so many unknowns. And while that, he's going to release that on January 26th, and that there was, positive news with the November forecast being much better than the forecast that came out in the summer. And that projected a surplus for the current biennium. It's unlikely that we're going to see much happening at the legislature related to the budget until March, and following that next forecast that will be released in late February, because that will tell you much more about where we sit. That said, there are some indicators of a more positive forecast that will come out in February, so that's hopefully will be good news. But I think there's going to be a lot of hurry up and wait until that forecast comes out for us. But when we get together in upcoming meetings, we'll talk more about what are some of those assumptions, and so, for families that may be selected to homeschool this year with the COVID model, or looked at options where they could have kids 5 days a week. What do we forecast for a number of kids coming back? Those will be some of those conversations that we'll look at. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're going to continue to monitor those county case numbers, and we'll be meeting with that regional support team next week, so we're able to update families by the end of next week. Don't know what that update will be, but we're I told Bianca with the regional support team, I'm going to keep signing up to talk to them so that we can keep providing updates for our families. And last, I just wanted to take another chance. I've been trying to do this at each of the meetings, but continue to be very appreciative of the staff throughout the district as they navigate the many variables that have been ever present this year. So our staff have been extremely flexible. And while there's been downtimes by each one of our 900 staff, for the most part, there's really been an enthusiasm and, taking the approach that we can do this. And I'm really appreciative of that. In particular, I really want to thank those staff who have been largely present within our schools each and every day. So staff who have been providing childcare, our food service staff who have been preparing meals for families throughout the district while we've been in distance learning, our custodians who have been here each day to be ready for students, ensuring we have safe learning environments, our nurses for all that they're doing each and every day, our office staff at the DSC and in our schools who have been present to answer questions of families. When we move to distance learning, while a lot of people are in distance, we still have a whole bunch of people that are within the walls of our schools still providing essential services, and I just want to really thank them and recognize the efforts that they're taking. And then, of course, for everybody else, all our teachers, the things that they're doing, all of them. Just another chance, every chance I get, trying to tell people thanks. The good news is I think we can actually start seeing that light at the end of the tunnel now, and we're excited that next week we're going to be able to bring our K-6 students back for those families that are ready and want to do that back in person. And hopefully soon we're going to see more and more kids being able to do that. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. First, I just want to say, as you were thanking everybody for their amazing efforts, every person on the screen is nodding their head. So I know everybody is in agreement with you. So I just want to reiterate that. Thank you to everybody. Anybody have any questions for Jeff?
I do. I know some districts are struggling with the staffing for next year based on average daily membership of students from this year. The drops in enrollment that have occurred and how that goes into next year, and what they're going to get for budgets and so on for that. Where do you think we stand in that, or is there any concern in our district?
Yeah, I think that's what I was referencing a little bit earlier here. Is that'll be a conversation we'll have with all of you about where we want to land with what our assumptions are. The good news is, starting out, I think we've got a lot fewer. We saw our net drop was a lot less than a lot of districts. So, some districts similar in size to us had over 300 students, 400 students that they saw that they lost. We're at about 100 kids is where we're at right now. So what do we want to forecast for next year? we're right now trying to get a better handle on where they all are. How can we reach out to them? You know, we could pick a number like, well, we're going to get all 100 back. We could say we're going to get 0 back, and both of those would be wrong. It's going to be somewhere in between. But where do we want to land as we forecast? I also think we're in a better situation, and for some of you that have been on the board for many years know that this is why we want to have a fund balance, is that we can maybe take a little more risk on that we'll get them back, and rather than reducing, you know, staff or ever having to look at do things like that, we can plan more purposefully for next year and see where that adds, because there's more variables and more unknowns as we go into next year. But we'll work together on that. Beginning the next time we're together, talking about what do we want to use. We always use that guiding change for budget with the board, and as we do that, what we'll be looking at is that will have to be a little bit more iterative this year than most years, because the assumptions, and if you think of that left column of our context and reality, those assumptions around enrollment, which is our primary driver of revenue, our assumptions around compensatory revenue, which is a big area that funds services for struggling learners. A lot of those things are really up in the air right now. So we'll have to talk about that and look at how we want to forecast that. And as the months go on, we'll get more and more clear on that. And of course, it's always a negotiations here as well. So long answer to a short question.
Well, and I think it also somewhat depends on what the legislature does, right, Jeff? Because they're the assumptions they make for funding for the coming years as well. So lots of moving parts. Okay. Anybody else?
A quick question, Jeff, just back to the 712 coming back. Will they be coming, are you anticipating 712 coming back in a hybrid format before?
Yeah, I think initially they'd probably have to transition back unless they were to lift, which at this point I'm not hearing any sign that they would be lifting that those numbers. So the first transition back would be to the hybrid model before we'd be able to do a fully in-person model.
Got it. So, thanks.
Yep.
It's a good clarification. All right. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm asking a lot, but you know, in these meetings, you got to give everybody a chance to unmute. And all right. Thank you, Dr. Ronneberg. All right, moving on to action items, acknowledgement and acceptance of gifts. Can I get a motion, please?
So move, Forsberg.
Motion by Forsberg.
Second by Strobel.
Second by Strobel. Thank you. To adopt the following resolution. Whereas School Board Policy 706 establishes guidelines for the acceptance of gifts to the district, and whereas Minnesota Statute 465.03 states that a school board may accept a gift of real or personal property by the adoption of a resolution approved by 2/3 of its members. Therefore, be it resolved that the School Board of Spring Lake Park Schools accepts with appreciation the following gifts that are on the screen. As always, thank you to our very supportive and kind community. We are always grateful for the donations they give us. Any discussion? Okay. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Ms. Forsberg?
Yes.
Mr. Kroon?
Yes.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Mr. Easter?
Yes.
Ms. Hennon?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right. I don't have anything else on the agenda tonight since we removed our closed session, so we'll move on to adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So is there no board forum?
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I kind of wrote over it on my agenda. Sorry about that. Yes, let's have board forum. Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Well, since I volunteered, I might as well start. Is that okay? I just want to mention that last Friday was the AMSD legislative preview for this year. So we had over 50 legislators present, well, virtually. And the governor talked, and the lieutenant governor talked, and the secretary of education talked. So it was a very well attended webinar, web session, virtual session. There was discussion about what's going on coming up this session. with a panel of legislators, and a group of superintendents also spoke related to the AMSD legislative platform to the legislators. So I think it was interesting. There was, obviously some sparring that was going on between the legislators, but nobody really knows what this, I think this session's going to bring. So it should be fascinating. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you again for reminding me. Anybody else have a board forum report?
Yes, if I can get myself going here. One of the comments made at that AMSD meeting, one of the questions asked was, could the legislature please get their budgeting for schools done earlier, because we have to get our budget to the state, and sometimes the legislature hasn't done their work yet, and they didn't give any encouraging news on that. So just a little follow-up on John's comments. 916 is going to try to do some work to get students back into the ALCs. That will include our students at Metro Heights. And the track record is not very good for those students. There's not very many of them that are passing their classes. So hopefully we'll get students back into the learning centers. I've been spending an inordinate amount of time on the superintendent search at 916. It seems like there's something almost every day that needs to be resolved with that, but we are to the point that the announcement has been made and the information has been sent out. It can be accessed on the 916 website if you're interested in seeing what that looks like. It's been sent to MSBA, the Superintendents Association, and others, primarily in Minnesota, because Minnesota has higher requirements for superintendents than the surrounding states. So unless it's somebody that has worked in Minnesota and then maybe gone to Wisconsin and wants to come back, they probably would not meet the requirements for superintendent. So it's probably going to be mostly Minnesota applicants. And the MSBA Leadership Conference starts this Thursday morning and 2 consecutive Thursdays following that. So if anyone still needs to sign up for that, I believe that can happen. Supposedly they say registration is closed, but I don't know them to turn people away. So I'm planning to look at that. And 916 meets tomorrow evening. We have organizational meeting like everyone else, and fairly routine business otherwise, I believe.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thanks for attending those meetings on our behalf. Anyone else?
This is Tony. I attended the PTO meeting at North Point, and great discussion on trying to identify some unique and creative ways to keep students engaged while they're doing their distant learning, and also a good informative discussion around bringing the kiddos back to school. So it was a good meeting. It was short, but it was very good and productive.
That's great. Glad to hear that people are still connecting, finding a way to connect. Great. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right. Anything else I'm forgetting before we go to adjournment?
I do have one quick question, and I don't know if I don't want to put Ms. Wheaton on the spot or Colleen Peterson, but I was reading some information about the Panther Gala put on by the Panther Foundation. How is it to it? I was wondering if they wanted to provide any information.
We talked about it before the meeting a little bit. So we had given an update. Marilyn has a big bunch of claims that she's going to bestow upon the Panther Foundation. There's different events that are going on leading up to it to try to get some more participation from those who have not been involved with the gala in the past. And I believe there are, something we didn't talk about, Colleen, there are the swag bags available. So there's swag bags available for purchase, and it looks like treats and selfie gear for people to become more involved in the event. And Colleen also mentioned that we already have $30,000 in sponsorship. And things that I hadn't seen being sponsors in the past. So that's exciting that in this year that people are joining on for that.
Okay. Awesome. And I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I was doing a little bit of reading on it because it popped up in one of my news feeds. And I'm just really excited about what the money is going towards this year. I think it's an awesome way to really support the Panther Pantry and to help those families in need.
Tony, don't worry. I did a tour last month, too.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't at the meeting last month.
We're just trying to get the word out there, so it's great. It's good. I don't think Colleen minds at all. We're just getting the word out. Good.
See, this is what happens when you miss a meeting.
That's okay. It's all right. It's good. It's a good reminder for everybody. Anybody else? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
So moved, Easter.
Motion by Easter.
Second, Wheaton.
Second by Wheaton. All right. To adjourn the meeting, clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bowe?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel? Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Kroon?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Wheaton? Yes. Mr. Easter?
Yes.
Ms. Hennon?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 8:11, and I'm sure you'll be getting more information in the coming days, but we will see you, everybody, next week. So have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.